Alright guys, today I want to share with you a little bit about my review of the Nothing Phone 3. Now bear in mind, I just want to make this very clear. This is more of the Malaysian review because we can't really compare our devices to Western reviews where they have a limited set of phones in their countries and the pricing is not similar. So I've seen some videos out there where some reviewers are comparing it to the S25, 25 Plus, the Ultra, the Pro iPhones and all that. Those are way more expensive than the Nothing Phone 3 here in Malaysia. Now this phone is going for RM3299 and someone's comparing it with the S25, which is a small phone. Doesn't make sense. If you actually compare it with a similar size phone, which is like the S25 Plus. Now the S25 Plus in Malaysia is RM4799. That's a whole 1,500 ringgit more than a Nothing Phone 3. So just in terms of price and perspective, I would say that this device here is sort of like a higher upper mid-range, slightly below flagship in terms of that sense. So I'm not going to talk about how we define flagship at all as well. You guys have your own definition of what a flagship is, so we don't have to go over that. But let's talk about how it feels like to use the phone. Now, first things first, let's talk a bit about the design. I'm going to give you a very unpopular opinion, and that is I actually like the design at the back. Now, hear me out. All these non-symmetrical lenses at the back, I kind of like it. It makes the phone look a bit different. It gives the phone a bit of character. I've seen pictures of photos online where someone actually used Photoshop to align it back to being more symmetry, and I didn't like it. I like it just the way it is right here. Now the second thing that I want to talk about here is actually about the glyph matrix. Now personally, I'm not a huge fan of this thing here, although I do like it sitting at the top right corner. I wish it was bigger, something like the ROG phones where we had a massive glyph so you can see like more graphics and all that. I think this is just too small and you barely even get to use it because it's just not very useful, I would say, in my opinion. There's a couple of games on there which I also don't really play. So do I miss the glyph of my Nothing Phone 1 and my Phone 2? Yes, I do miss that very much. I wish they actually came up with both. So if we had like glyphs like at the backs here and together with the matrix, I think it would be a great combo. But till today, after using it for a couple of weeks now, I think that this is still strongly a gimmick, but that doesn't deviate me from the point that I actually still like the look of the Nothing Phone 3. Let's move on. Now let's talk a bit about the performance. So this phone is using the Snapdragon 8S Gen 4. Like I said, it's not the most powerful chipset out there that goes to the 8 Elite, but it's actually very similar in terms of performance to last year's flagship chipset, the 8 Gen 3. So the 8S Gen 4 is sort of like very slightly above the 8 Gen 3, but below the 8 Elite. And it's still much more stronger than all the mid-range chipsets out in the market today. So that should give you a brief idea on how you can expect the performance of the Nothing Phone 3 to be. It's going to be great. It's very fast, it's very fluid, and that's all thanks to the Nothing OS 3.5 on board as well. If you're really chasing like the most strongest performance, yeah, I mean obviously this won't work for you. But if you're just talking about very strong day-to-day performance, fast when you're just taking photos, good enough to play almost every single game with its highest graphic levels, the phone actually still performs very well. So I'm not sure why there's so much hate on it. In fact, it uses UFS 4.0, so you have fast storage on board as well. And Nothing is committing to giving you 5 years of major Android upgrades. So that's also great because not every other phone manufacturer out there can commit to that. So those are things that I think must be appreciated for this device, the performance side of things. All right, now let's move on and talk about the cameras. So the cameras for me is sort of like a mixed bag. Now we do have upgrade resolutions over here, 50 megapixels all around. It's a 3x tele, a main sensor, and an ultra wide. So I've been using it to take a lot of photos during my travel. I think I have like accumulated 500 to 600 photos right now in the phone itself. And based on my opinion, everyone's opinion on photos is very different. I think the main sensor is a great sensor. It's able to capture pictures with a lot of detail. The colors, I love the colors coming off here. It's very similar. It's not overdone like some other phones with collaborations because they need to have that kind of look. It's very similar to the iPhones and Samsungs, which has always been the case for Nothing phones. So you're going to get very good clarity, very good colors, very accurate. Now when we move to the telephoto lens, the 3x in my opinion is not far enough. So that's a straight up point. So whenever you try to zoom even further than more than 5, 6 or 7 times, it's going to be using that 3x lens and it doesn't capture enough detail. So I think that the telephoto lens could have been improved a little bit more because even when you shoot at 3x, the amount of detail that I get for the photo is okay if you just look at the photo without zooming in. But once you actually try to zoom in a little bit, maybe you want to see a bit more of that shot, things start to get a little bit blurry and it's not that great. Maybe this can be fixed in the software update, I don't know, but for now, I think that the telephoto lens can be better. In terms of the ultra wide, I took a couple of shots. I'm not really an ultra wide kind of shooter, but I think it did capture a very good amount of detail. So the good sensors are the main. The okay one is the ultra wide, and the one that I wish was a bit better was the telephoto lens. Let's move on. What else? What other points do I have here? Oh, the display at the front. Okay, so for the display on the front, I think this time round, Nothing actually put in the best display that they have put in any of their phones to date. So the size is a 6.67-inch unit. You get 120 Hz. It's fairly high resolution. We have 460 ppi, which basically means that, yeah, it's high res enough. And more importantly, it goes all the way up to 4,500 nits of maximum brightness. Now, this brightness is actually very useful for me because I was out in Iceland shooting under the very strong summer sun. And at every point, I could always still see the display very clearly, especially when I'm taking the photo. Furthermore, we have this very symmetrical bezels that goes all around. It's also slightly slimmer, and I think it's just a very aesthetically pleasing look at the front. Now, last but not least, let's talk a bit about the battery. So the battery in here is a 5150 mAh unit, obviously not the largest one out there, but surprisingly enough, it was good enough to last an entire day, which is pretty much what I would expect of most phones today. You know, I have the habit of charging my phone every night before I go to bed, so if the phone can last more than 1 day, 1.5 days, that will be even better. But if it only lasts a day, a full day, I still think it's good enough. I would only consider the battery bad if it were like my S25H, which only runs like 3/4 of the day at most. Now that would be a bad battery. So I think the battery in here is still okay. Furthermore, we have faster charging speeds, which is 65 watts wired. Unfortunately, there's no charger in the box, so it's really dependent on the charger that you buy. Make sure you get the right charger to be able to enjoy that fast 65-watt charging. Now, before we go, one final thing that I want to highlight here is in terms of the essential key at the side. Now, personally, this is something that I find very redundant because it's not a feature that I use. I don't find the feature very useful, you know, putting screenshots into spaces and all that. Personally, it just doesn't work for me. So I'm not sure if it will work for you or not, but I did wish Nothing allows us to reprogram this button to, you know, act as a shortcut for other features. Right now, it doesn't. If it does already, let me know down in the comments. I might have missed it, but yeah, I still find this button quite redundant, and you know, I very often press it instead of my lock screen button, which can get annoying at times. So overall, what do I think about the Nothing Phone 3? Just judging it based on the phone itself, I honestly think it's a great device. It has a lot of meaningful updates compared to its predecessor, the Nothing Phone 2. In fact, it's only 300 ringgit more than the Nothing Phone 2, but it brings along a lot of upgrades all around. Now, if you really want to go and compare it to other devices in the market, like I said, here in Malaysia, we have quite a fair bit of choices, and the pricing is not the same as other countries. Honestly speaking, when I first heard of the price, I was wishing it came in at 2,999, which would be the same as Nothing Phone 2. I think everything would have been so much more peaceful then. 3,299, I think is slightly steep, but it's still understandable considering the kind of specs that you have in here and the overall experience that you get. Anyway, yeah, that's just my 2 cents on the Nothing Phone 3. If you have any further comments, let me know down below. You know, this is an open community after all, and yeah, you are free to have your own thoughts about the device. With that said, thank you for watching. Hope the video has helped you out in a way or another, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye. And yeah, you are free to have your own thoughts about the device. With that said, thank you for watching. Hope the video has helped you out in a way or another, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.